Hi there, I'm Emma Hollywood and welcome to And the Show Goes On. I'm an actress and, like so many, I'm navigating the highs and lows of this unpredictable industry. But there's more to my story. I'm also living with an invisible illness. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the show really does go on. In each episode, we'll dive into the world of acting, uncovering the realities behind the glitz and the glamour. We'll talk openly about the challenges, from auditions to the art of managing it all with health challenges that don't take a day off. And I won't be alone. I'll be joined by incredible guests, actors, advocates, and others who share this journey. Together we'll share stories, laughter, insights, and inspiration to help you keep pushing forward no matter what. So join me every week on And the Show Goes On. Let's navigate this path together with resilience and a sense of humour, because no matter what, the show goes on. Hello and welcome back to And the Show Goes On. In today's episode, I speak to podcaster and narrator Ben Dykstra. Ben lives in Canada and has cerebral palsy. He talks to me about his experiences of the voiceover industry and specifically what it's like being a disabled voiceover artist. Thank you, Ben, for speaking with me, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, so hi, Ben. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Like yourself, I'm a podcast host, the host of the Sit Down Standout Show podcast. I also do voiceover work and audition for audiobook narration roles. I was born with cerebral palsy and just recently turned 27.
Oh, amazing. You say you do podcasting and voiceover work. What first drew you into the world of voice work? What made you want to go into it?
Well, I don't think there was like one particular thing that drew me into it because as a kid, I was always interested in the cartoons like Pokemon, Diamond Pearl, Yu-Gi-Oh, Beyblade, animated shows like that. But I never thought, oh, how do I get into that industry until I was in college studying for radio broadcasting. And I met my roommate, William McGinn, who online he likes to do a lot of his own videos based on video game franchises, kind of like his own like little tribute videos. So that really got me into it at the beginning, and it's just really been interesting to kind of explore not only opportunities that are available, but you know, my own voice and what I can bring to characters.
Yeah, amazing. So you have a podcast called the Sit Down Standout Show. What made you want to create a podcast, especially about disability?
That really came from a place of frustration and lacking of a purpose at the time because right as I finished college in 2019, in the spring of 2019, and then COVID hit and it affected everybody in different ways. But for me, I thought, okay, I've spent most of my time living at home, living at my parents' house. I'll just go through this pandemic. It'll be super, super easy. I'll find work from home, do voiceover work, acting jobs, but that didn't happen for reasons I still don't quite understand. So I thought to myself, I cannot be the only disabled or challenged person dealing with that. And so many people have either been silenced or just straight up ignored as a result of their disability challenges. So I decided to create my own platform.
So you live with a disability. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about that and how it affects you with your voiceover work and your podcasting?
Absolutely. I was born with cerebral palsy, which is a condition where you sustain brain damage as a result of various things. In my case, I was born about 10 weeks prematurely. So I was born with underdeveloped lungs. So I did not receive enough oxygen at birth. And as a result, I experienced some brain damage. And as a result, this affects both of my legs and my left arm. The good thing about cerebral palsy is it's not a degenerative condition. So there's no long-term like deterioration. This is as bad as it's going to get, and people with cerebral palsy can be expected to live a full life. Now, as far as how it affects me on a daily basis, my right hand is usually more utilized and dominant than my left hand. I use a power wheelchair to get around everywhere I go. Um, As far as voiceover work, I think it pretty much affects me in the sense of the confidence because you always should be honest about your disability, but at the same time, you feel almost like if you write down your disability and explain it, then you have to go through, okay, here's how you have to accommodate me because I might need things that you didn't think about. Or it might be the fact that, oh, they recognize him as disabled. Oh, let's give him the non-moving, non-speaking role of a tree.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be really frustrating. I know you've just touched on it then, but have you had any ableism, like with your job and with voiceover work?
I don't think I've necessarily experienced ableism as much as I've experienced unintentional ignorance
Yeah.
for people who have either not experienced being around too many disabled people or people who just don't have enough education in the field and they think, okay, here's how we accommodated one person. It must mean this is how we can accommodate everybody. Or it might be you think you have an idea, but you don't know anything about the particular struggle.
Yeah, I think people can forget like disability is a spectrum. So I think they try and put us in one box, but we can't really be put in one box because we all have different disabilities and different needs.
100%. Like, for example, when I went to school, I was the only person with a disability that was purely physical, that was just cerebral palsy. It had nothing to do with my cognitive abilities. Everyone else I went to school with that had a disability was likely going to stay in school until they were 21, go into after school programs, require special education. While they did test me to make sure that I did not need to go into those programs, at the same time, they always sat me with people with the special needs. They always tried to get me to hang out with them more often than not. And I said to them, first of all, how dare you? Because I can socialize with pretty much anybody if I want to. And second of all, you guys know that I can't connect with them on that level because that's a hard thing for people to understand is just because I have a disability does not mean that I am in the same category as someone with a intellectual disability.
Going back to your podcast, you interview people for your podcast. What kinds of people excite you the most interviewing? Like, is it actors, advocates, or just anyone in general who has a disability?
Well, I can't tell you that it's a specific profession that excites me.
Hmm.
I enjoy hearing from particularly people who have gone through stuff that I cannot physically imagine, or people that may have a limited time left on Earth as a result of their condition. Like, say, for example, someone with multiple sclerosis or MS, a disease that will gradually deteriorate their health and make their life so much more difficult. But here they come on my show and they're telling me about all the happy experiences that they've had. They're trying to make the most of what time they have instead of letting their condition define their existence, letting it hold them back.
Yeah, it must be really lovely being able to talk to, different people with disabilities and allow them to share their stories. And I definitely feel that with my podcast. And do you feel like it's really rewarding speaking to other people who, are different to you?
Well, it's rewarding, but it's also frustrating. It's
Yeah.
rewarding because growing up, I lived in a very small town. And as I said, a lot of the people I went to school with had a cognitive disability. So my knowledge of individuals with different conditions and their capabilities was very limited. So I wanted to avoid people with disabilities as much as possible growing up because I wanted to feel like one of the able-bodied kids. But now that I'm older and a little more mature about these things, it's so rewarding because it shows me a lot of things that you can have a disability that affects your life on a daily basis, yet you're still able to live a fulfilling life. And it also gives me a sense of gratitude because I could have had it so much worse. Like I literally could have died the day I was born due to that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back to being a disabled creative, what changes would you like to see as a podcaster and a narrator to make the industry more accessible? Like, what are your, say, like top three things that you think need to be changed to make it more accessible?
Well, I think we need to eliminate the geographical issues. Like, for example, when COVID made everything remote, I thought that was beautiful. It should have happened a long time ago because geography for someone that has to live at home, live remotely, work from home, has got to be one of the biggest deterrents for even trying to get a job. Also, I think in order to change things, there needs to be more of an open dialogue between the people in charge of a project and the disabled individual involved. I'm not saying that we should get like input in all of the projects. Like, there's nothing wrong with offering a little bit of input, but at the same time, it's like if you want a good quality product, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a play, whether it's a film, you need to communicate with your cast and crew what your vision is. And if you're not willing to open up your mind to modifications, some changes, then I'm pretty sure your project is going to fail.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think it is becoming more accessible? I mean, I'm not sure how long you've done your podcast for, but do you think it is getting better and better, like slowly but surely?
Yeah, I would say in the this will be my third year of doing it. I would say that slowly but surely we're getting better. Like for example, you and I had a previous conversation
Yeah.
about the Wicked movie coming out. That is such a step in the right direction. There was a movie on Disney Plus. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a child that went to school and had a communication device with Jennifer Aniston's voice in it, and she has a disability. So slowly, I think we're opening up and making more and more progress. And I have been able, through my podcast, to interview people from the United Kingdom, from Canada, from America, from Australia, from Israel. Growing up, if you were to tell me as a child that you'll meet people from all over the world, I would have said, "What have you been eating?"
Yeah. What have you learned from other people? Like, it must be because you're talking to like many different people with many different challenges and experiences. What have you learned speaking to those people? Have you taken anything away from maybe like a specific person or an interview that you've done?
Well, I would have to say the takeaway, first of all, is express your gratitude when you get things, whether it's something you wanted or whether it's something you needed, because you could always have a worse circumstance. Like, say, for example, you could have been like I've had two near death experiences and I'm only 27. I
Oh
could have
gosh.
died very easily at a younger age. I could have so much more brain damage than I do, to where I could have been in the special needs programs. I could have been at the age of 21 told, okay, we're going to have to put him in an adult living situation for the rest of his life. So, to first of all, express gratitude. And also, I think one thing that needs to be talked about more in terms of dealing with mental health, if we're having a bad day, like say somebody is having a flare up from a chronic illness, it's okay to say, you know what? I can't come into work today. I'm not well. That is not a sign of weakness at all. That is taking care of yourself both physically and mentally. And people really need to start accepting and understanding that. Now, there are people who may use that as an excuse, but that's why communication is so important so you can figure that out.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself? Like that is something that I am still struggling with. So what advice would you give to someone who's struggling to say no to things?
Well, I think it changes as you get older. Like, for example, if I was having an issue, I had educational assistants helping me take notes all the time. And sometimes we would have arguments because we are around each other the entire day, all day at school for 5 days a week. So you're bound to butt heads. But if they started yelling at me using loud noises, because I don't react very well to loud noises, I have a bad startle reflex, I would get terrified like a scared dog and want to hide in the corner. And normally I would go to my mother. and she would write an angry letter. So I called them the legendary angry letters whenever I need to talk to her about something. So, but what I would recommend anyone do if they're having trouble advocating for yourself, first of all, watch other advocates to gather some inspiration from them. And I would also recommend sit down with someone you trust. Get down in a quiet space where you're comfortable and kind of reenact what you would like to say and do it repeatedly to build your own confidence. And hopefully, with enough time and a little bit of patience, you can learn to stand up for yourself and lose that fear of the consequences.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm going to take that on myself. Where do you see yourself in like 5 years with you and your podcast? And because you're the owner of Rolling Dragon Media, aren't you? So where do you see yourself with that in 5 years? Like, where do you want it to go in the future?
I honestly try to only look like a couple days ahead, not years ahead,
Yeah.
just for anxiety reasons, because life can be so unpredictable. What I would like to do is I would like to expand the geography of the show because I'd like to be able to speak to people from all over the world. Like I recently put a post up on my social media about how the only language I know, unfortunately, is English. Even though in Canada you're taught both English and French, I never was able to figure out the French part. What I'd like to be able to do is kind of lower the language barrier and figure out a way around it because if we've never allowed our disability to be a barrier for living successful lives, why should a language barrier get in the way of my podcast? And like whatever rules come along in between, I'm just gonna go along for the ride.
Yeah, for sure. What advice would you give to other people who maybe want to start a podcast or want to get into voiceover work, whether they have a disability or don't have a disability?
Do not expect success overnight. It's a very competitive industry, both podcasting and voiceover work. I mean, as we're even speaking, there's probably a couple of podcasts that are airing their first episode and a couple that are probably airing their last episode. What I would do is I would take down a piece of paper and carefully jot down as much detail as you can. Take the time to find people who are equally passionate as you and help you put it together. There's a great organization that helped me set up my podcast called Community Living Trent Highlands. Their job is pretty much to help people with disabilities in the area where I live called Halliburton to try to find jobs. They not only helped me write down the whole plan for the podcast, they helped me fund all of the equipment I'm currently using. So find people who are equally as passionate about you, about your project, write down the details as much as you possibly can, and be consistent because sometimes people can give up too quickly if they don't get the results that they're looking for.
Yeah, have you faced any hurdles with starting your podcast? Because for me, like I'm not the most amazing technological, if that's a word, person. So have you found there to be kind of any hurdles, whether that's related to your disability or not, starting a podcast?
Well, I mean, as far as hurdles, I would have to say trying to figure out the physical setup of it all was one at the beginning because I still lived at my parents' house at the time and I didn't live at the apartment I do now. So it was hard to let them know, like, at this time of the day, I need you guys to be quiet so I
Yeah.
can record this interview. Like, one time I had to ask them to be quiet at 7 in the morning because I was interviewing a guy from Tasmania where it's 11 o'clock at night over there to talk about the challenges of bipolar disorder. So that was a unique challenge in itself. And I think it's also trying to convince people with disabilities that I am someone who is not going to judge you. I am someone who is going to listen to what you have to say and is going to respect your story. Because there are some instances of people coming on my show that have been through such severe trauma that it's unbelievable. So you have to try to be as relatable and as empathetic as you could possibly be.
Yeah, and I think you do that amazingly. What would you say to someone who is disabled that wants to start a podcast that feels like they can't because of their disability?
I would say probably do as much research as you possibly can into, okay, how have other people done it? How have other people with the exact same disability as you been successful to give you that sense of confidence? Also, get a friend group together. Try to come up with ideas, brainstorm. Anything you want to do, it's possible. It's just a matter of how much effort you're willing to put into it. And if that's not something you're interested in, as long as you're honest with yourself, there's no shame in that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for speaking with me. Where can my listeners find your podcast?
Well, you can find the Sit Down Standout Show on our website at www.rollingdragonmedia.com. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Keep calm and roll on, my friends.
Thank you, Ben, for speaking with me. If you want to listen to Ben's podcast, it is called The Sit Down Standout Show. I will link it in the description down below. Make sure to check out my episode as I have spoken with him for his podcast, and this will come out in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye!